people on the you were just like very so maybe that's like the same.
I think pressure or you and I haven't tried like to reduce the size of video feed. It's very high resolution, so if you can reduce it, but for screen capture you don't know how to do that. It's just it's only in the kind of
well, and it's like okay, so there's first it's huge big frame, no updates for like quite some time. Suddenly, if you
exactly
next slide or you
that might make the whole thing.
I'm not able to. Have you? Is there a page down for this? Okay, just with this one. Okay, yeah, okay, we have to use that one. Okay, yeah, even when I was sitting here, that's fine.
Thank you. You're about to add it as well?
Not transport CC. But I guess
yeah.
I would want like the standard.
Yeah. And you're not planning to
Google processing
I would discuss that.
That's depends on the.
No, there was actually we have a GitHub for that work that goes back like 6 years, and I think it was not. Yeah, that one. That one.
People than I was expecting.
So I guess we start.
Okay, we'll see.
Okay. I think it's time to get started. So this is the RMCAT session. So I'm Anna Brunström. This is my co-chair Colin Perkins, and we also have Martin Stimmening as a chair. This is the note well. Applies to all our meetings. If you're not familiar with it, then please read it carefully. So as usual, you have the slides available in the data tracker. We have some people connected through Metico. Do we have someone on Jabber that can, thank you, Jonathan. Someone that can help out with the minutes. Should be an easy task today. We have a fairly short agenda. Do we need someone? Well, it's for your talk, I guess, because you usually take some as well.
Yeah, I can't take minutes while talking.
Exactly. So I see Alan. You have been a very reliable minute taker for us. Can you take a few on the Etherpad? Thank you. So we have a fairly short agenda today. So we're going to go over the status of the working group and the different documents. Jonathan has promised to give a short update on the hackathon that was during the weekend. And then Colin is going to talk about the RTCP feedback work that is now driven in AVT core. So let's start with the overview of our working group documents. So we are finishing up our algorithm document. So we already have the SCREAM and SPD that has been published. NADA is ready. Martin is writing this up. He was going to submit it before today, but he got sick. So I hope we will get this submitted very shortly. And otherwise, me or Colin will have to help on this one. And of course, the GCC draft is dormant, and we don't really expect any updates on that. So the algorithm draft that has had some activities since the last meeting is the coupled CC draft. So this draft was finished quite some time ago, but it has been waiting in the editor queue for the NADA draft because of the normative reference. So in the meantime, there was experimentation with this draft, and there was a corner case detected that in some instances, all the bandwidth was not fully used. So this was detected by Julius in doing some of the measurements and experiments with the draft. And this was also presented in our last meeting. So the decision there was to try and solve this corner case before we got the draft published as an RFC. So as a result of that, the draft has been returned to the working group to solve this issue. And the authors have also made an update to the draft that has been sent on the list for any comments. There were some things that could be a bit more optimized in the presentation. So the chairs are working together with authors to just refine and have a bit more compact and general description of the solution that was in the draft. So as soon as we finish up that part, which should be very soon, we expect to then return the draft. It first needs to go to our AD for approval, and then if we have understood the process correctly, we can return the draft directly into the RFC editor's queue. So this is the status of this draft. And Mirja wants to say something. Yeah.
Yeah, Mia Cleveland. If I remember correctly, the discussion was last time we have to see the changes to figure out what to do next, right?
Yeah.
Because
So
the alternative would be to run another working group last call and everything.
So I mean, it's been on the working group for comments.
Mm.
The draft was the solved draft was fixed there. I mean, we can run a short round of comments also on the final version before it goes to you. Then the way I understood it from the RFC editors was that then you basically have to approve or decide what to do
So
with the
if
draft,
it's a
I
small
guess.
change, I can approve it, but this is not a small change anymore. So maybe just like officially running the last call again. And then I can also put it as a returning item on the IESG agenda. I mean, it doesn't really, doesn't have any implications for you, just to follow the process correctly, I think is the right thing to do.
Okay, yeah, sure. The process was not fully clear to us, but if you prefer, we can run a formal working group last call when we then put then I think we just do that on the new version, because we have a new version that has been based on the discussions between the chairs and the authors to refine the presentation. Okay, thank you, Mirja. So we will do that, but still, I think this will be solved and finished up very soon. Then we have the requirements and evaluation draft. The requirements still waiting in the editor queue, has been there for quite some time. We now also have the video traffic model draft finished, so that is now in the RFC editor's queue. The eval test draft has also been submitted to the IESG, and the authors are working to solve the last comments that are coming through that review. So I think that this draft will also very soon be passed on to the RFC editor. Then we have the eval criteria draft. This draft is basically also done. It's past the working group last call, but we are waiting for the authors to make the final updates. I think it's the security section that needs a little bit of work still, and then this draft will be submitted to the IESG. And then we have the RMCAT wireless test draft. This draft is also past the working group last call, and we're waiting for an author update to take care of the comments that came up during the working group last call. There were not so many, but there were a few, so we need an author update there still. So I hope that we can also get these two drafts out very soon to finish up also the evaluation and the requirements part of the work. Then we have the work related to the feedback. So here the draft on the feedback message is now with AVT Core, and it's also on our agenda that Colin will give the working group an update on how this draft is progressing there and the work that has been done. And then we have the RTP-CC feedback draft that is a RMCAT draft, and that will be updated once the feedback message draft is completed to reflect the final version of that draft. We've had some draft related to interfaces, and this is on hold and will be potentially picked up again when the candidate algorithms are progressing towards proposed standards if we get there. The milestones, we are finishing up most of our milestones. So we had the milestone in December for the requirements and evaluation drafts. We submitted most of them, but we have the two that was just mentioned that needs to also be finished up and go there. And then we need to move into the evaluation results of the algorithms and see if we can also move some of them forward. So that are the upcoming milestones for the working group. Okay, that was the last slide on the overview. Now let's see if I can get rid of our slides. But the second point on the agenda is Jonathan giving us some update from the hackathon. You don't have any slides, so I can work on the slides while you give us an update.
Hello. So this is on, right? Okay. So yeah. So Sergio Mena, who is in the Jabber, in the Unico, and I worked on, but then with Nils on Sunday, then not on Saturday, worked on getting interop of CC feedback working, and it actually worked. So we had interop flow between me in the hackathon room and Sergio in wherever he is, Zurich, I think, somewhere in Switzerland, with him using a Firefox, which and me using our proprietary algorithm, successfully interoperating. I mean, we didn't do careful studies because we basically got it working just as the hackathon finished, but it stabilized at about 350 kbps, which for the amount of video we were sending and for the link we were using seemed pretty like a plausible number. I think was feeding the whatever the algorithm is in libwebRTC, which is some flavor of GCC. So that should be so. And then ours is our proprietary algorithm, which was able to adapt pretty easily to CC feedback. There were a few interesting things we ran into. One is the tricky thing for an algorithm of distinguishing between lost packets on the forward path, not reacting to lost feedback as though they were lost packets, because that can be, that obviously you don't want a lost feedback to cause oh my God, there's terrible congestion, slam down, but you also don't want it to be, oh no, I'm sure everything's fine, nothing could possibly be wrong. So exactly how to that's something that the algorithms need to think about a little bit. The other issue that we ran into, I mean, partially because of some bugs in our working on our interop, but the CC feedback, unlike most RTCP messages, isn't actually inherently bounded in size. So we ran into the issue that we had CC that when one side or the other was getting its feedback interval badly wrong, we ended up blowing out our MTU with the feedback messages. We ended up like 2K or 3K of feedback in a single packet, which doesn't work well. So, I mean, fortunately, you can break it. The format's fairly easy to break up, but you had to actually take that into account and do that. So that's.
But that's not normal behavior. That's a bug, right?
Oh, I mean, it was. Yes, but I mean. Basically, but I mean, I could imagine situations where you have sufficiently asymmetric bandwidths between the two sides, where one side is getting quite large bit rates, and the other side has very little bit rates, and so has to have a relatively slow feedback interval. So I mean, it was basically then just a matter of, okay, when you hit an MTU, stop putting in this packet and put in the next packet. But it was a
Yeah, I mean, this sounds like guidance for this sounds like guidance for the RMCAT draft, which is giving advice on how to configure.
Yeah, it's somewhat guidance with RMCAT, but also guidance in the ABT core draft saying, do stop and start a new packet when you hit an MTU. The other issue is that because SDP ABNF is arcane, it wasn't immediately clear to Sergio what exactly the A equals syntax was, so we might want to have examples in the draft. Like I said, we didn't really do any performance analysis or anything like that yet, but hopefully now that we have it working, we can start looking at that. And particularly what I'd like to do is check what is the relative usage of this versus the equivalent transport CC feedbacks. So that's something we could potentially look at. Any comments or Sergio? I see you're here. Is there anything else you wanted to say? You have to actually. Since I'm the Jabber scribe, you'd have to actually do it in the Medico. Or Nils, anything else you recall? No. All right. So that's basically the status of it. I don't think we found anything spec-wise that was wrong.
Good to know.
Yeah, Sergio did note that Transport CC has like I think a feedback sequence number, which makes it a little easier to discover when you've lost something. But after we discussed it, we realized that because you have the RTP sequence numbers, you can figure out not necessarily how many feedbacks you lost, but how many feedbacks of how many packets were lost. So that's probably sufficient for anything you would need to do. Sergio's here.
Okay, Sergio, you're on.
Hello. I don't know if the audio. The audio is choppy. I don't know if you guys can hear me well.
The audio was not great there. Talk again. Okay, that's better now.
Okay, so I'll talk slowly. I think from the experience we had this weekend, I think that the draft would be good if it included a way to basically merge all the vectors of sequence numbers that we are getting at the sender into one single sequence number, which is what most congestion controllers are expecting, especially for losses.
So I understood the question.
So he was saying that most congestion controllers want a single sequence number space across all streams. I mean, I think that was what the Transport CC did. I mean, you can do with this level of indirection, you can do that. You basically just have to keep the data structure locally mapping your sequence number and SRC pair to a global sequence.
Yeah, so Colin Perkins as an individual, I just too hard to walk to the microphone. So yeah, I mean that has certainly been suggested before. As Jonathan says, if you give the sequence numbers per SSRC, you can reconstruct a single sequence number space. And by doing that, you can congestion control each flow separately, which you can't do if they're all combined into a single sequence number space. This way you have the choice
of per flow congestion control or
across aggregates.
Or aggregate. Yeah. And then also you don't have to send that extra sequence number anywhere. So you just save the header extension.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, yes, I mean, so it saves on the header extension. And I think the main benefit is that you can control each flow separately if you want to do so.
I mean, the converse would be true too. If you had a single sequence number, you could maintain the opposite mapping and remember which one was on each flow.
I guess so. Yeah. But you then need the header extension.
Right. Yeah. So I think.
Also, it sort of matches, I think, how RTP works better in that RTP has sequence numbers per SSRC. So using the existing thing rather than trying to sort of twist RTP into something else seems more natural to me.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with Colin, but it's still, I think that's something that
I think we should put. I mean, one of the open issues in the draft is to put some rationale for the design choices.
Yeah, rationale, and then also guidance. Things like, hey, you probably want to maintain if you need a single sequence number, just maintain a mapping, and maybe even guidance like this is how big a open window you'll need. in terms of things like that. So, all right.
Okay, thank you. Sergio, you're still in the queue. Did you want to make some more comment or?
Hello, can you hello? Can you hear me?
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm guessing you said no because you disappeared from the queue. And unfortunately, the audio was not great. So if there was something else, please post it. And thank you, Jonathan, and for the work in the hackathon. I think this is very useful feedback. So then we move on to the next presentation, and that is Colin on the RTP congestion control feedback.
The box has turned into a pink cross. Okay.
I feel like this is like in a cartoon where he's down to the piano ball.
Hopefully there's no pianos in here. All right, so is this working? Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay, so I'm Colin Perkins. I'm going to be talking about the RTP congestion control feedback draft. So this is a draft which is joint with Zahed and Varun and Michael. Which we've been talking about for a while. We had some feedback from the hackathon in the Bangkok meeting, which we discussed in both AVT Core and RMCAT, based on the implementation experience from Jonathan and I forget who else. There was 3 or 4 people in that crowd. We had a long discussion in the Bangkok meeting going through the comments, trying to come to some resolution, and I submitted the 03 draft. I believe it was just before Christmas to try and address those comments. We've got one hopefully final change to the packet format and a bunch of clarifications, but there weren't any major changes in this version of the draft.
Oh, we actually used the 03 in our
Okay, so the interrupt was with the latest version. Yeah. Okay. Good. All right. So the only real technical change was that the packet format, rather than having begin sequence number and end sequence number +1, now has begin sequence number and number of reports. And this simplifies the logic in the rest of it and simplifies the explanations in the rest of the document significantly. And it makes it very easy just to put a number of reports of 0 in the case where you haven't received anything to report. So that clarified a bunch of things, and it doesn't use any more bits. I believe this is quite a nice simplification to the spec. Other than that, we've made a bunch of clarifications. There was a long discussion in the last meeting about what to do with packets which arrived after the report, and what cases that in what cases that could happen, and so on. Sorry, I can't hear the comment, Jonathan.
Yeah, Jonathan, I don't think we actually implemented it. I think we implemented the other direction. We had it as offset after, so we'd need to.
Okay, yeah. So
I don't know. I need to.
So
actually, no, I don't know.
The way this has been written was that you have the report timestamp and all the offsets are how far before in time of that. So the report timestamp represents essentially.
Right.
I think it used to say the time at which the report was generated, but the time at which you're reporting and everything else is.
Or maybe
negative.
I just had a bug in my code, but it still worked amazingly. I don't know.
Okay. Yeah. But there were some issues with what happens if you if you need to report on a packet which came after the report's timestamp because you're sending a delayed report for some reason. So we clarified that. We clarified exactly what the meaning of the report timestamp was, just to make it clearer what you were basing all the timestamps on. We clarified that rather than reporting on every SSRC that's being congestion controlled, you report on every active SSRC. Since as a receiver, you can't tell which SSRCs are being congestion controlled or not. So you have to report on them all and let the sender do the right thing. You should just stay at the microphone.
No, I did. Jonathan, I just thought of another thing that came up in our in the interop. So the question is, because of the way SDP negotiation. Maybe this is more appropriate for core than here, but we can talk about it anyway. That because it's not clear if it's legitimate to list this feedback on some but not all M lines in a bundle. So
yeah, okay, yes.
So that needs to be clarified. Should it be allowed? If so, what does it mean? Yeah. So,
Okay, yeah,
and the other thing that came up, which I mean is not directly about it, but it just occurred to me also, is that you need to make sure in an offer answer that, at least for an answerer, that you only negotiate one congestion feedback mechanism, because we had a situation where, like, you're offering, transport CC and REM and CCFB, and the other side can happily say, sure, I'll do all of those at once, which doesn't tend to produce good outcomes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. If you can send email, then I will make sure that gets put in. Yeah. Okay. Other than that, what do? We clarified that overlapping reports may be sent and specified what happens when you get overlapping reports. In that if a packet is reported as received and you then send a later report which covers the same sequence number range, then you need to mark the packet as received in that, so you avoid contradictions. We also clarified what happens with duplicate packets, saying that you report the arrival time of the first copy of the first of the copies of the duplicate that arrives, and if any of the duplicates of ECN congestion experience marked, you report it as congestion experienced. Otherwise, you report the ECN mark of the first copy. And the ECN mark should be consistent, but who knows? So we at least specified what to do if they're not. The draft had some long discussion about what you do if there's an outage when you stop receiving packets for a while, and how you recover from that and how you detect the outage, which we just took out since it's a general RTP issue rather than something which is specific to that draft. So you should just use whatever mechanism you're doing for the rest of your RTCP implementation to detect that things have failed and you're recovering. And we clarified some of the SDP. That there was a comment that whether you allow to signal this for particular payload types within the SDP, or whether it has to apply to all payload types, and that the suggestion at the last meeting was that it should apply to all payload types. So I wrote that into the draft. And I think the final, if I'm remembering right, thing we added was a section clarifying how it relates to the ECN-capable RTP and the previous ECN feedback formats, since they both allow you to report on ECN. So we provided some guidance on what to do and what's the right thing to do in that space. Other than that, at the time I wrote the slides, there were no open issues, but Jonathan's just given me a couple more. So there are a couple of things we'll have to clarify. I think we also need to clarify the relation to the alternative solutions in the space, and in particular the proposal, the Google draft, the Google browser uses, and highlight the sort of benefits and the trade-off. And I'm hoping that this can go to working group last call fairly soon, although it seems like we'll need at least one more revision. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Collins. Any other questions? No, seems not. Okay, then we are at the end of our agenda. So thank you all for attending, and if you're an author on the 2 outstanding eval drafts, let's try to get those final pieces submitted so we can get those drafts also sent in. And then we hope to maybe have some results on experimenting with algorithms in the next meeting. So if you're working on that and want to present something next time, then let us know. And we have one more comment on Metacode, so please. Sergio,
I just wanted to
up.
point out that even if we are not presenting anything during this RMCAT meeting, Xiaoqing, myself, and others, we are actively working on getting NADA into Firefox in order to do experimental results. Xiaoqing already showed some preliminary ones based on RTT, and we're now working on one-way delay, for which we need actually to combine our work with CCFB. So expect some results soon.
Okay, thank you, Sergio. That's very good to hear. And I know that Ingmar has also been working on the Scream, some Scream experiments. So maybe then next time we will see both some results for both Scream and NADA, which will be nice. Okay, thank you all for attending, and this concludes our meeting for today. Let's see if we can exit this one for our next. Did you actually, was it?
I was treating it as a browser going back. I think it's a web browser. So I was just using cursor keys, I think. Using the browser. No, I can't work it.
It's very unclear at least. Now you're.
Okay, now go rid of everything. But I think this gives us a browser.
Yeah, when I came in. Okay, yeah, here it is probably. Then it was.